Yes. On to our co-chairs. Great to see everyone.
I know. Waiting for my screen to populate here. Oh, there we go.
I'm
Good
just going to test
afternoon.
my audio. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our October 29th Oregon Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee meeting. It's good to see everyone. Kick the meeting off and start with introductions. We'll do them round robin as we have been. So when I tag you, please introduce yourself and pass it along to the next person. So I'm Dave Thompson. I'm an at-large member and one of your co-chairs. And I'm going to pass it along to Kathy, our other co-chair.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Can everyone hear me okay? Welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. It's really great to be here. I'm sorry if I stumble around, as this is my first time co-chairing, but happy to see everyone. And do you want me to go straight to public comment, Dave, or do you?
No, pass it along to the next person.
Oh.
Pick somebody on the committee and pass the ball to them.
Perfect. Beth, why don't we jump to you?
Hi, I'm Beth Young. I am the representing local government and planning member. I'll pass it to Mavis.
Hi, I'm Mavis Hartz. I am the business representative for at least one more time, and happy to be here. Andre, I saw that you're on.
Hello, everyone. Andre Lightsey Walker, use he, him pronouns. I'm an at-large OBPAC member. I'm not sure who went. Dell, did you go already?
No, I did not.
Okay, perfect.
Hi, I'm Del Scharfenberg. I'm from Milwaukee, Oregon. I guess I represent the trails, which has been not very active lately, but I'm representing an inactive group, I guess. Anyway, happy to be here. I'm a pretty serious cyclist and pedestrian myself. I'll pass it on to, let me see who's not on there yet. Emma?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Dell. Hi, everyone. Emma Newman here. I use her pronouns based in Springfield, Oregon, and I'm happy to share with the committee that City of Springfield just recently rehired me. I worked there for a number of years, and I'm now the transportation planning manager at the City of Springfield. So furthering my involvement in this realm and trying to do more good in the community. Happy Walktober. We're celebrating Walktober over here. So for pedestrian fun and walking in October, I just wanted to say that's been going on locally. And Mavis, I'm so glad you're still here. Glad we got to keep you. Kathy, thank you so much for chairing. Did we miss any other committee members, or is everyone introduced at this point?
I believe that was everyone. So I'm going to pass it off to Ian, if you could introduce yourself and any other ODOT people that you want to have introduced.
Ian Davidson. My pronouns are he, him. I'm the bicycle and pedestrian program manager out of the public transportation division. And I'm one of the people that staff this lovely committee. And I'll pass it over to Roberto.
Thank you, Ian. My name is Roberto Cotto. Use he, him pronouns. I am the active transportation program analyst here at ODOT, and I support the OBPAC advisory committee as part of my role. Just for the records, Nolan Poole and Carrie Robertson are our other two advisory committee members that may be joining us, so I'll keep an eye out for them. I will pass it over to Leanne if you can introduce yourself.
Sorry, there's a slight delay in my computer. Hi everyone, Leanne Ferguson. I'm the Senior Active Transportation Policy Analyst here at ODOT and in PTD. Work real closely with Ian, Davidson, and Roberto. We're really glad to have you all here today. Is there any other ODOT staff that are presenting that y'all want me to pass it to, or should I pass it back to the chairs?
Could you pass it over to Ian Clancy?
Ian Clancy.
Hello, Ian Clancy. I'm a PTD's multimodal network analyst. I'll be here to present a little bit about key performance measures here in a few minutes.
Okay. So I believe that the normal course is for any other ODOT attendees or guests to please introduce yourself in the chat. And I'm now going to real briefly go over our meeting goals for today. So first up, as we just heard, we'll have a presentation on the ODOT's bicycle and pedestrian key performance metrics. I think that hopefully this will be of quite a bit of interest to committee members. I always feel like we're lacking metrics in the bicycle and pedestrian world, whereas in the auto world, there are lots of metrics. So, and I'm a numbers guy, so I like metrics. Then we're going to get a follow-up briefing on ODOT's new capital investment plan. And Kathy and I actually, I think, got this briefing yesterday at a meeting we're at that I will talk about later, but basically how ODOT's planning to do project investment going forward. Ian's going to give us an update on recruitment for our open position. And then we're going to have a discussion of what apparently we're calling committee member feedback. This came out of a discussion I had when we were prepping for this meeting and trying to figure out ways to allow our members to be more actively involved in determining what we're trying to accomplish and how we're going to do that. So we're just going to start the discussion today, and we'll see how that goes. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Roberto to go over meeting etiquette. Roberto.
Thank you, Co-Chair. So as Co-Chair Dave mentioned, this is a public meeting. We are recording this meeting to just abide with the Oregon public meeting laws. Anything that gets posted on the chat room or is being said in the meeting today is open to the public. Just a reminder, if folks are interested in providing public comment, please let us know in the chat room or raise your hand through Zoom that you're interested in providing public comment. Anyone from the public that is participating or joining us today, please keep your phones or Zoom on mute, and also your camera off. Just due to bandwidth, we try to just have our advisory committee members on with their cameras. And so I think we're ready to the next item, Co-Chair.
Yes, thank you, Roberto. So public comment, when I looked up what was submitted, it looks like we received one memorandum. So I want to thank Cimarron Gillespie of Springfield, Oregon, Christy Harmon of San Francisco, California, and Avery Welkin, I hope I said those names correctly, from Bremerton, Washington. They submitted what they called a memorandum on Unified West Coast Bicycle Tour Route. So all committee members should have received that in the packet of information, and it will be entered into the record. I want to thank them for this memorandum. It was really insightful on their review of other bicycle tours that are available in other states, and for their kind words about the Oregon Coast Bike Route map. So any other remarks to that public comment, or any other public comment that anyone wants to make today? We'll take the remarks first. If anyone has something.
Yeah,
Emma?
just add a little bit. I think, this is an opportunity to celebrate what we're doing in Oregon. I was looking a little bit more in detail. What is OBPAC's action item that we might kind of push on and advocate for more? Seems like food at all of the campgrounds would be one of those. That's more of a state parks item rather than ODOT specifically. And then in conversation with a local community member over the weekend, I found out a bit more about state parks funding. So I'm going to drop a podcast episode that was featuring the director of state parks, and they're facing a 14% reduction if status quo kind of continues. So I encourage my fellow committee members, if you're interested in learning what are they facing for budget challenges, and that informs the context of how they might be able to add services or be looking at cuts to existing services, which this letter from Sims kind of articulates. And I would say I just reached out. He's a friend of mine as well, lives here in Springfield, and we hosted him part of the Oregon section of his bike tour this summer. And he said that the multimodal integration with some of the big industrial areas, that was primarily in California. I wasn't clear if there were any of those here in Oregon, but I think it's mostly the food storage and kind of consistent signing. Oregon's doing a lot of things right, so let's keep doing those things right.
Thank you. Anyone else commenting on the memorandum? Mavis?
I just want to reiterate how important maps and stuff like this is for wayfinding and for bringing tourism in and having people stay super safe when they use our systems. Because if they don't know where to go, then they make up their own routes. And I'm very glad that this is happening on the Oregon coast. I'd like to see a little more because, well, Oregon is a large state and we have a lot to showcase.
Thank you. Great point. Gabe and I also discussed maybe highway updates when there's a change in travel plans or change in route, to also notify this community, the bicycle community, which often has to make very large detours if traffic is a problem, especially if someone's on the, let's say, Oregon Coast Trail, they're following that. It can be difficult if there's a change in traffic pattern. So one other thing we can maybe push forward is this committee, that notifications be geared towards this community as well. So thank you, Dave, for pointing that out yesterday. I wasn't aware that there's not a separate announcement or an additional consideration for cyclists. And then if there's any other folks in attendance that would like to make a public comment, would you unmute yourself and see if we can get any of that? Okay, and thank you, Emma. Emma also posted a link in the chat with some information that we can all consider. But if that's all on public comment, then I'll pass it back to Dave.
Thanks, Kathy. So next up on our agenda is approval of the July minutes. Do any committee members have any questions or corrections or other comments on the July minutes? Not seeing any hands. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move we approve the minutes, and I want to compliment, I think it was Roberto that did those minutes. Extremely good job on that. Thank you.
And do I have a second?
I will second.
Thanks, Beth. Okay. And Roberto, remind me, do you need to get a tally of the votes?
We can just get thumbs up from the folks who are participating. We have
Okay.
enough folks from the quorum, and if there's no opposition, then we can move forward and accept those
Okay.
minutes.
So all in favor, please thumbs up.
So we're good. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thumbs up for
Okay.
Carrie Roberson.
Oh, hello, Carrie. Thank you.
Hey, Carrie. Glad you could join. Okay, back to Kathy for our first presentation
So-
introduction.
Yeah, so we're going to discuss key performance measure report. So we'll get some information first from Ian Davidson, and then we'll have some discussion, but I think he's going to do this in conjunction with Ian Clancy, who's the multimodal network analyst. So I'll turn the time over to Ian and Ian.
Yes, you have the privilege to hear from two Ians today. No promises, but there may be a third Ian that pops up at some point. Ian, would you mind pulling up those slides?
Yeah, let me get them here.
Okay.
Everybody seem
Ian,
okay?
Yeah, we can.
All
You
right,
want to
great.
take it away?
Yeah. All right, so my name is Ian Clancy. I am PTD's multimodal network analyst. I work with various transportation data sets, including transit data sets and others under the multimodal umbrella, including some active transportation and passenger rail. And I'm the keeper of PTD's key performance measures, or KPMs. And for any of you who might not know, KPMs are intended to inform budgetary decision-making at the legislative and executive level. And my role is to make sure our KPMs are submitted to the legislature on time every year. So ODOT's key performance measures are target metrics approved by the Oregon legislature and used across ODOT's divisions that measure annual progress in several categories. And each year, the results of the calculated measures are recorded and reported to the Oregon Transportation Commission and then to the Oregon legislature. And one of our 4 measures here in PTD is colloquially known as the bike ped KPM, and it measures 2 things. Those are the percent of ODOT priority corridors that achieve a target crossing spacing distance of 750 feet, and the percent with walkways and bikeways that are considered to be in fair or better condition. So I'll talk a little bit about the history of the KPM and the process we use to arrive at the priority corridor lists. The priority corridors are a product of the current iteration of the bike ped KPM. The KPM used to only measure the percentage of urban state highway miles with bike lanes and sidewalks in fair or better condition just by itself without involving marked crossing spacing at all. But that iteration of the KPM was determined to be unfeasible since it tracked highways in all urban areas of the state, and it didn't account for highway segments that were completed and then jurisdictionally transferred. So we were basically chasing an impossible moving target. And so ODOT made the decision to overhaul the KPM in 2016. And then the plan for updating the KPM, which we worked on with the assistance of Kittleson Associates, was completed in 2021. Adopted by OTC in 2022 and then by the legislature in 2023. So as you can tell, the process of changing a KPM is potentially pretty lengthy and has to go through several channels. The primary changes with the new KPM were to focus on a consistent set of priority locations rather than all urban areas across the state, and also to add evaluating marked crossing spacing in addition to the presence and condition of sidewalks and bikeways. So as part of this reworking of the KPM, PTD would also create a collection of set lists of statewide priority corridors, which we bundled together so we could have a consistent measure of progress on sidewalk, bike facility, and crossing completeness for the next 10 or so years, while looking at the same mile point to mile point segments over 10 years to measure improvement. And these priority corridors were created using a combination of GIS analysis with the assistance of the Transportation Planning and Analysis Unit, and analysis of the active transportation needs inventory, or ATNI, and guidance and input from each of the region active transportation liaisons. And our goal was and is to have between 100 and 150 miles of priority corridors, and our grand total for all regions was 133.62 miles with the final quarter list. Our goal is also to produce a list of corridors which are feasible to implement with the amount of funds we have. And we won't be shooting for 100% completeness with these in 10 years, as we see with this a chart that Ian Davidson will present in the next few slides here. With a 2-page narrative we submit as part of the completed KPM. And our current plan is to gather data and monitor the progress of the KPM over the next few years, and then eventually revisit the KPM and the target metric as necessary. And as a little side note, if an ODOT highway is jurisdictionally transferred, we count it as 100% done for the purposes of tracking this KPM, which was another pitfall of the previous KPM I mentioned that was addressed with this one. So this is a little snippet of the recently updated map of the priority corridors we have on ArcGIS Online. You can see all the small orange lines that each represent a priority corridor, and they get easier to see as you zoom in on the actual map. So we can provide a link in the chat that you can use to view the map on ArcGIS Online if you'd like. I'm going to hand it off to Ian Davidson to talk a little bit more about what the KPM measures and our progress.
Thanks, Ian. So as you can see here, the priority corridors are distributed all across the state in all the different regions. There are urban segments, there are rural segments. It's kind of spread out across. But by focusing on priority corridors, ODOT has been able to begin to prioritize its focus on investments in bicycle and pedestrian assets. And I'm stressing begin because while this process began quite some time ago, the KPM is relatively new. This is only our second report, and only now is ODOT beginning to rethink prioritization as new projects come online with this new framework for prioritization. So as Ian alluded to earlier, there are a few different things that we measure, and we tap into different data sets that ODOT has available. We look at crossing spacing, bikeway presence, and of course the condition of it, whether or not it's fair or good, sidewalk presence and the condition, and then ultimately we wrap that all up into a system completeness score. Could go to the next one. So crossing spacing, what do we mean by that? Simply is there a marked crossing every 750 feet along a segment of priority corridor? So on those orange lines on the map, is there a marked crossing every 750 feet? So if there is, great. For that segment, awesome. You have accomplished that portion. Sometimes you have segments of highway where there is marked crossings for a portion of that highway, and then there will be a segment where it does not meet the key performance measure. So that is the cross spacing, or excuse me, cross spacing requirement. Could you go to the next slide? So bikeway presence and condition. First, I'll just pause and say that I love this photo. This is a photo of a recent project down in Philomath, downtown Philomath. It was a new streetscaping project that they did. If you ever make your way out to Philomath, check it out. There's a couplet, a highway that's a couplet. And on the south side, you can find this segment. It's great, as you can see. It's comfortable enough for a small child to bike on. Anyways, what the KPM is, though, is measuring the presence and then condition of the bikeway. And then next slide is sidewalk presence and condition. Here, this is in Lincoln City. And so this is a new sidewalk. And so it's taking into account the sidewalk presence and condition again. And so it's looking on both sides of the highway. So is there facilities on both sides of the highway? And then if so, what is the condition of the sidewalk? And then next slide. So, and I see your comment there. We'll grab the link and drop it in there in a moment. So these are the priority corridors. And so just to, I guess, refocus it. So this is this new, the rethink of the key performance measures, unlike, as Ian mentioned, the old bike ped key performance measures, allows ODOT to focus its efforts, its active transportation investments on these key priority corridors. If you could go to the next slide. So we now have data from 2023 and 2024. What we're reporting to you on is 24, though of course we're happy to talk about 23. So the blue, well, first I'll orient you to the goal. So the goal for all items of the key performance measure is to hit 49%. So that's 49% for crossing spacing, 49% for walkways and bikeways, and then 49% for system completeness. So in the blue, or excuse me, the light blue bar chart is, or bar is for crossing spacing. So from in 2023, we had 33% completeness, and that increased by 1% year over year. And then in the dark blue is walkway and bikeway in fair or better condition. And that stayed level. That's not too surprising because this is a new KPM that's prioritizing certain corridors. One way to think of this is that by changing or refining the key performance measure, what ODOT has done is we have taken flight by means of an airplane as opposed to a helicopter. So we are right now picking up speed on the runway. We're not able to just lift off vertically. So I would expect that in future years, as more attention and focus is paid to these priority corridors, that you would see that number increase more in subsequent years. Candidly, I would be quite surprised if that number was to jump considerably in 1 or 2 years. And then system completeness, that's just a sum of the crossing spacing and walkways and bikeways in fair or better condition. So we are exceeding the goal in walkways and bikeways. We're still not yet to the goal in crossing spacing. So we know where we need to make some progress, and we're identifying where we need to make some investments, and we're beginning to make some progress. So I'd be happy to answer some questions from committee members.
I had a question, Ian.
Mm-hmm.
So I put it in the comment, does the bikeway presence and condition KPI take into account 4-wheeled versus 2-wheeled? So like, is it safe enough for wheelchair? Because we know some of these same facilities will be used by that population as well. And sometimes the tire and the grade matter to that population versus the 2-wheeled population. So does that account for that group in this measure?
Yeah, my understanding is that when describing condition of fair or better, it absolutely takes into account the Americans with Disability Act as that's a prerequisite of meeting the fair condition. So being able to use a mobility device, that includes the slope, the condition of the pavement or asphalt. Yeah, that would include that. Mavis?
How do I get on a priority corridor? How are those established?
Yeah, so Ian briefly alluded to that earlier, but that was informed by a few different tools from the get-go. It was a data-informed process that So this predated me, so I'm not going to be quite as fluent as perhaps others, but they utilized the active transportation needs inventory, which is a tool that ODOT developed a few years ago that took into account a gap analysis, bicycle level of traffic stress, pedestrian level of traffic stress. I don't think it took into account pavement condition, but maybe it did. So it used some of those data tools. It also took into account input from the regions. So recognizing, hey, we've received quite a few community complaints about this segment of road, or hey, we have an upcoming project on this segment of road. So it was quantitative and qualitative. It was a hybrid approach there. So ultimately, the priority corridors were informed with data, but that's I hope that was a comprehensive answer. I wasn't there, but that's how I understand it. Ian, is there anything else that I missed that you'd like to add?
No, that pretty much sums it up.
Okay.
I think that was a good explanation.
Will those be changing over time? I mean, are we going to get more? What's kind of, because I think the whole thing should be yellow, but I mean.
Yeah. I expect eventually, yes, there will be changes. I think one of the strengths of the current model is that it focuses investment. Given that one of the stated challenges of so in 2024 there was an audit conducted of ODOT's investments in active transportation, and one of the primary concerns was a lack of financial investment. And given the limited financial resources as one of the driving causes, until something like that changes, there needs to be a prioritization. And this is presently how ODOT has chosen to address that.
I think we have a question from Dell also. Sorry.
Yes, I was wondering why the goal is only 49%. That seems like a pretty mediocre non-priority goal.
So the goal will change as we meet it. It will continue to climb. Think of the goal as an interim goal, where the ultimate goal is 100%, but we want to be able to. It's a shorter term achievable goal.
And Ian, did I cut you off? Did you have another response to Mavis?
I was just going to add that what we like to do is give it like a couple more years or so and let some more data flow in so we can really do some more detailed analysis, and then we will think about revisiting the target at that time.
Okay, thank you. Emma had a question as well.
That's along those same lines. If it's a shorter term goal, I was wondering, well, what's the time horizon? And it sounds like there's not necessarily a specific time horizon to get to the 49%. It's a roll out the system, observe it for a few years, and reassess a few years from now. Is that what we're hearing?
Yes. Yeah. We every 2 years we have an opportunity to reassess the goal.
And I had a question, if there's not another from the committee. I've noticed a couple of places here in Newport where if ODOT or the state has done some work to connect or improve ADA access points or sidewalks, sometimes there's a connection that doesn't lead anywhere. So they've done the state portion, and then is there any work or coordination with cities? Because for wheelchair accessibility, for instance, if there's a connection that goes off, but there's no sidewalk or safe street for the rest of the path to get anywhere, an individual's basically stuck. So we've met the goal, but we haven't met the purpose of a safe environment for them to either on or off ramp that particular road.
So if I understand you correctly, in this instance, we're talking about, for example, a priority corridor highway where we might have sidewalks and ramps, but you round the corner or the intersecting street is a local street, and
right.
The local street does not have sidewalks, does not have those kind of pedestrian amenities. Is that right?
Right. Exactly,
So
and Highway 101 is the prime example and the one I'm thinking of.
I do know that the regions do work with local jurisdictions to the extent possible, to notify them, hey, we're going to be doing this in several years. Sometimes timelines don't work out. I know that there have been instances where local jurisdictions in the state where their timing just, they're sometimes working on the same corridor 3 years apart just because they couldn't line up the funding at the same time. I wish that weren't the case. Sometimes it just winds up being the case.
I can,
but there is engagement. Oh, please.
There is. Sorry, I'm going to just quickly add, since you were specific, Kathy, about my area. So I'm the active transportation liaison in Region 2. And I can just tell you one quick answer to that is that ODOT has a settlement agreement to remediate and bring up to current standard all ADA ramps. But that settlement does not include the sidewalks between the ramps or the connections between the ramps. So the settlement agreement right now is a big focus of our agency. We are fixing all the ramps, but we literally can just do ramps and not everything in between. And there's not money allocated for the connections between. So you're going to be seeing that. Yep. There is local coordination, like Ian said, but we literally don't have funding for the between the ramp islands.
Okay.
Yep. It's a great question. Thank you for asking.
Thanks for having an answer. Okay. So any more questions about this great study or report to get us some actual metrics? Beth, you had a hand up.
Okay. How often is the active transportation needs inventory updated?
What a wonderful question. It's
wonderful because it's hard to answer.
No, so it was, I think it was created in 2020. It has not been updated since. Some of the underlying data has been updated and is updated on a regular basis. So some of the underlying data is updated every 6 months, every year. It depends on the time scale. We are, as you'll hear later, the capital investment plan is helping ODOT rethink some of its investment strategies and helping us reconsider our prioritization schema on some things. And so I think it's a good opportunity for us to take another look at the active transportation needs inventory to maybe give it a rethink. That'll take some time and some resources, but it's certainly a worthwhile effort.
Ian, I've noticed a lot of other state organizations or agencies have their information on GIS maps. Is that inventory on a map, or are there any plans to put it on a map?
It is on a map, and let me see. So I know I've now been asked for
Google
2
it.
maps. Let me see if I can get them and stick them in the chat. Sorry, I've been focused on you all. So yeah,
I'll drop that in if you can focus on the KPM map. That's the one.
Yeah, I'm getting that one as well.
Yeah, I have a conflict with my presentation screen here, so I was gonna drop it in afterwards. But
we'll race for it.
If you can get it, Ian, that's great.
Yep.
That concludes my question.
Okay. And having some technical difficulties, so I'm going to ask Leanne to share them, but they're coming shortly. Oh, Emma found the Atney. Thank you, Emma.
here, I'll go ahead and get it here in a second.
Oh, Leanne got the KPM.
Oh,
map
you
in
beat me
there.
to it.
Thanks, Leanne. And then I'll just flag as a wrap up, in your meeting materials was the 2-page report that we send in to the legislature, and that contains a little bit more information. And so Ian or I would be happy to answer any questions outside of this meeting if you have any. You know, if you wake up at 3 a.m. and realize, oh man, really want to ask about the KPM, feel free to email us. We probably won't answer at 4 a.m., but we'll answer at a different time.
Yeah, it's a bit too early for me.
Yeah.
I've got Ian's cell phone if anybody needs it.
Just
One
a
of the
comment
Ians.
before we move on. This map is quite detailed. I'm impressed. Yeah.
Which one, the ATNI?
I'm looking at the ATNI.
Yeah.
Active needs transportation inventory. Okay, that's all.
Okay, thank you, Ian and Ian. Appreciate that data information shared. We can move on to the next item if there's no other questions. I think that's me again. So we have some OBPAC business. Everybody's going to update us on their committees. If you have anything to report out, can we start with Safe Routes to School Advisory Committee? Is there someone?
Nolan, he's not here.
Oh, he's not here. That's right. Sorry. Oregon Recreation Trails Advisory Committee, is that Dell?
Well, like I said earlier, both of these committees have been on hold for a couple of years now, so there's absolutely nothing to report. I think the ORTAC is due to underfunding in Parks Department, and Scenic Bikeways is done by Cycle Oregon now, so we've pretty much been disconnected from those. Sorry about that.
No problem. Thanks
So
for.
if I could jump in, I did get an email today. Apparently, you know, minus an advisory committee, they did the Oregon Recreational Trails, whatever the organization is, advisory council reported to, just released a draft 2026 plan for trails. If anybody's interested, I can drop a link in the chat, so I'll do that. Sorry, Kathy.
Dave.
You can go ahead.
No, thank you. I'm next on the UAC committee. We had one meeting in total, and then the things with ODOT happened and the meetings were canceled and postponed. I did get an email from Brenda Gessner just saying that, you know, basically all future meetings have been canceled right now. And they hope to just keep us informed on what iteration UAC will have in the future, but she and specifically will not be heading or advising this committee in the future. So it doesn't preclude us, I guess, that current or future members could chair and co-chair the facilitation of continuing to meet on this topic, which I think a lot of work went into creating the committee and creating it in such a way that it can have a diverse voice for the various ways that someone can be considered disabled and be part of this community. But for now, there's nothing happening and no meeting scheduled. And there's a jurisdictional transfer advisory committee. And Emma, are you on that?
I am. So we
I
met.
have a question before you, for Kathy about. I'm always a couple steps behind here, so excuse me. But Kathy, it's so there's no ODOT funding for that committee. They formed it a couple year ago or so and got all together all these great people, but now there's no funding for the liaison.
Right, there's no staff funding.
Yeah.
Someone to staff
Okay.
it and continue the movement of it.
Okay.
So
So
that
that's
doesn't
just
keep us from doing our own thing. I guess we have been stood up. We can find a chair and a co-chair and continue to meet on the subject. It just doesn't have right now an ODOT connection
okay. Thank you.
in staff. Okay, Emma.
Thanks. I'll actually go back to Dell's committee topic for a moment because I
Okay.
talked with Richard Hughes, who is based here in Eugene, Oregon. He was part of Greater Eugene Area Riders, which is a regional riding group. Natalie Inouye is with Traveling Counties, the two of them, and Doug Perro, who I don't actually know. Apparently, they're looking for a home for the scenic bikeways. And to the earlier comments around the importance of maps and signage and communicating with community members, Richard was describing a specific situation where there's some signage or the ride with GPS. They're not synced up on one or more of the scenic bikeways, but because the scenic bikeways haven't had a home for several years now, he's requested access to try to clean this stuff up, but there's challenges happening around even just some of the basic communication around signage and electronic wayfinding routing. So I'm hoping that scenic bikeways can get some love and attention and find a home soon. And there are the names of 3 people who are working towards trying to make that happen. I don't know what it will look like, but there's just a little bit more information I gleaned from a community conversation on that topic. Jurisdictional Transfer Advisory Committee. We met. We exist as a committee still. So given the theme of this committee business, I'm proud to report it still is a committee, even though the state legislature did not fund the recommended corridors for jurisdictional transfer. Given that lack of funding and not seeing any future funding on the near-term horizon, the committee is recommending that we loop back around to the 2024 candidates, the jurisdictions that submitted corridors, so Hood River and Tigard. And for the existing applications, check in with them and say, do you want to withdraw? Do you want to revise with an updated timeline and budget since inflation and other things change over time? And then put out a call for new projects, but try to limit the amount of staff time and energy necessary to express interest in a new project. So it'll be a letter of intent or a full application. We're trying to both say there's a need for jurisdictional transfer funding. This is a huge issue in the state, but let's not pour a ton of resources into something that's not going to be funded super soon. So it's that trying to have the sweet spot of do good, keep this momentum going, recognize we're in the current funding state that we are with the state legislature.
I see Beth has her hand up.
Sorry, Beth doesn't have a question. She took that down.
When I looked at my notes, one more thing, we're looking for a small city rep from regions 3, 4, or 5 and law enforcement representation. So if any of you know folks who might want to be on the Jurisdictional Transfer Advisory Committee who are small cities in regions 3, 4, or 5 or law enforcement, please let me know or connect them directly with Stephanie Millar is the ODOT staff person supporting our committee.
Thanks, Emma. Do you want to put those names in the chat who they should reach out to, just so everyone's got it? So if that concludes that, we're a little ahead of schedule, but we are scheduled to have a break. Do we want to continue on and go to the update on the capital investment, or do we want to break early?
Kathy, are you looking at the most recent annotated agenda that Ian sent out yesterday?
No, well, no, I am now. So I guess I'm turning it back to you, Dave.
Okay. Okay. So, yeah, so on that, we added one item to the OBPAC business. So yesterday, Kathy and I attended a meeting that happens every 6 months or so with the chairs of all of ODOT's modal advisory committees, including ours, and chairs of the area commissions on transportation, which represent all the different areas of the state as an advisory group to ODOT. So the presentations that we saw there yesterday, one of them was basically a legislative update. So for those that may not be aware, House Bill 3991, which is the one that was finally passed to at least not cut ODOT funding a whole lot, is still awaiting signature by the governor, but the assumption is that she will sign it. I think there's some politics at play there somewhere. But that, and then ODOT kind of briefed us on what that means for them. It's primarily operational funding, so it's not really funding projects so much as allowing ODOT to continue operations. And I don't know this at all, but I'm guessing that maybe some of the things that got kind of dropped during the funding crisis may get revisited once that's finalized. I don't know. ODOT is now hiring to try and replace people that have left, and also to do their seasonal hiring for winter maintenance. So a lot going on there. And then the other major presentation was on the capital improvement program, which we're going to hear, our capital investment program, which we're going to hear about here shortly. So I won't go into that. And then each of the represented committees had a slide basically on what they had done and were planning on doing over the next year. And I believe this group discussed what we might put on ours last time. So we presented that. So that was it. There'll be another one of these in the spring. It's a pretty informative meeting. Kathy, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, there was a few details that were interesting. So there's an increase in some funding that's going to be made available to small cities. There's an additional $1 million, I think they said, going to small cities. There's a payroll tax that was part of it. And the DMV increases of $139 for registration fees were part of it. There was some discussion about freight and what's considered balanced. It's a very interesting discussion. I hope we hear a little bit more about that later, because I'm not sure I'm in agreement with interpretation of balance. But the road usage charges for efficient vehicles were part of this bill, and that will be 5% of gas tax, 2.3 cents per mile for efficient vehicles. And I guess that begins July 1, 2027. And I guess folks can either pay that or opt out of a flat fee. And those things will be handled by a third party going forward to manage that funding, those charges. So a lot of interesting stuff in that bill that people should want to look at in detail and just see what's happening. But like Dave said, it's expected to pass. And the key goal was to avoid some layoffs and other deep reductions in ODOT. Increase some local government funding by 30% was mentioned, and policy changes to fund transportation. So they did mention an interesting statistic. So there was 1 in 7 is the rate of vacant positions. So hiring has started in ODOT. So if you know anyone in the transportation world, I guess direct them to ODOT, because they're going to be needing some help, specifically, I guess, in construction and maintenance. But those things will be happening here fairly soon. So Thanks, Dave. It was a very interesting meeting. Lots to think about for the future. And I'm excited to hear about the capital investment and to hear the rest of the committee's thoughts on what was proposed.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. The one other thing I'll mention from the meeting is that during the Q&A, I asked Director Strickler if, given the funding challenges that ODOT was going to be continuing to face, even with this bill passing, whether the ODOT would continue to push forward and make progress in bicycle and pedestrian areas. I said that I believe that ODOT had made a lot of progress in the last few years, and we would really hate to see that stop or regress. Obviously, didn't get a real specific answer to that question, but put it out there. Okay. So at this point, we are almost right on the schedule. So we'll take a 15-minute break, and please be back by 10 minutes after 2. Thank you.
And Amanda, I also have your presentation if you want me to share that with the group. I'm happy to move the slides around.
Yeah, thanks, Roberto. Hey, everybody. It feels like coming home when I talk to OBPAC. I used to manage the bicycle pedestrian program. So Emma Newman, Mavis Hearts, original peeps on the group. So good to see y'all again, but good to see everybody else too. So I'm Amanda Peets. I'm the administrator for Policy Data and Analysis Division. So I oversee our planning work, our policy work, climate efforts, research, data, and now the safety program as well. So that's kind of the portfolio there. And I'm here today to talk to you about the capital investment plan. So I think I've shared a little bit about this in the past. I'll just give a kind of brief overview. And then I know that OBPAC, you shared some comments with the Transportation Commission on the capital investment plan priorities. So I'll let you know where they landed with that and kind of what some of the next steps are. So that's really the purpose of today's conversation. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide, Roberto. Thanks. And feel free to interrupt anytime with questions, y'all. So this is a little bit about the capital investment process. I'll back up to say what is the capital investment plan again, just for review. So it's a way for the next 10 years that will identify the investments that we're going to look into more, that we're going to start developing into projects and figuring out how we program over time, if that's possible. So it's a little bit different way than we've done things historically with a STIP or Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, by really divorcing out the policy conversation, having that at a different level, having a longer runway to really develop projects, to know how much they're going to cost, to know all the components that should be part of those, and to have an accountable way that we're advancing outcomes, supporting multimodal movement, some of those kinds of things. So I'll talk a little bit about this process, and then Chair Thompson, if there's anything you want to say from our Acton Modal Chair meeting that we had yesterday, feel free to jump in as well. But what we'll do for this process is kind of look at how much money do we think we'll have in about a 10-year period. That'll be a range because there's not certainty in what we'll get in the next 10 years. There's a federal transportation reauthorization that needs to happen. There's been some funding that's come into the organization for maintenance and operations. And at the same time, there's a threat of a referendum that they may repeal some of that. So there's a lot of uncertainty on the funding side. But we'll give kind of a general estimate to understand how much do we have to work with, high and low estimate. And then we'll pull investment ideas from asset data, whether that's safety data on the system or information on our critical gaps for ATNI, the Active Transportation Needs Inventory. Where do we have critical bikeways and walkways that are missing? And use that to identify projects. We'll also pull from plans and studies. So think about adopted plans like a facility plan or a transportation system plan for a local jurisdiction, pulling from that information. And then we're working as well with our area commissions on transportation to have a very deliberate role in informing this process by looking at things on a regional basis. ACTs, the area commissions, have representations from the various modes. I was encouraging them yesterday to talk to the modal committees more and have some cross collaboration there. For example, I think it was Southeast ACT is trying to get a bike ped representative and having a hard time finding one. So we're going to try to network and get them representation there. But if OBPAC has some thoughts and guidance, I think sharing those with the area commissions would be great as they're putting together some of their lists and thoughts. So we'll take all those ideas, we'll screen them through criteria, technical criteria to make sure that the project that we're looking at, like a sidewalk, is a good sidewalk project, right? It's in the right location, the right kind of characteristics of it. So that's a technical criteria. Whereas the policy criteria is said, okay, we don't have a lot of money, so how do we elevate the right things to the top that we should be spending on that advance key goals or outcomes like safety and equity and climate and some of those kind of things. So that's what the commission set as their for their decision this week, is they set their goal weights, and I'll talk about that in this presentation. And then we'll kind of review the list and say, okay, well, this is what came out of that criteria process. Does that make sense? It's not going to be perfect, right? So we may see, oh gosh, we don't have enough urban and rural balance. We have not enough freight and people balance. So kind of looking at some of those kinds of things, and then figuring out generally when we think projects should be sequenced. So that creates a plan. That's the capital investment plan. And so these are the things we're going to look into. These are the things we're committing on our interest for investments. So next slide. And then so Roberto, if you want to flip it when you have a chance. Cool. And then we'll figure out how we take those projects, and when they get to a certain point of development, we understand the risks, we understand how it needs to be phased, and then we're ready to commit funding to those. So that's when those projects go in the STIP that we have. So STIP still exists, but it's more of a runway and a pathway directly into that. The STIP will update it annually, so new projects will move over. We're going to do more phasing as part of that. And we'll really figure out what projects move based on that risk assessment and readiness, as well as urgency, though. If there's something like there's pedestrians being killed in an intersection, even if we don't understand all the risks of that project, that's an urgent project. We need to move forward sooner. So looking at that and making sure we have available funding. So that's kind of how that process will work. Let's flip to the next slide. So what we did with the commission earlier this week when they met is we shared with them all the letters that were sent to the OTC, so including one from OBPAC, some of the other committees, and many of the area commissions. We summarized the comments from the modal committees. I think I did a pull quote, Mavis, of something you said at this committee in one of the slides to just say, while everybody talks about maintaining the system, we don't have a complete system for the bike and ped network. And so kind of highlighting some of those comments and needs. And then we did the same for some of the area commissions. And then we focused in because urban and rural came up a lot in a lot of the conversations about how there's kind of different and unique needs. If you think about something like safety in urban areas, that's kind of spot specific locations, might be a really specific intersection, whereas in rural areas, it tends to be roadway departure. So it's a different type of solution, different thought process on how we address those things. And then we calculated all together all the feedback that we got, and we put together this pie chart that says, okay, here's what we heard as accumulation from everybody in terms of weighting. So you can see here on the pie chart, safety is kind of the lighter blue hatched. Part of the square was rated really high. Stewardship and state of good repair, that's where you see maintenance and preservation was also pretty high. And then mobility accessibility, so multimodal access, efficiency on the system, those were also up there. Next slide. So after a lot of discussion, they kind of voted again in the room and had kind of a split between all the goals, because all the goals are important in one way or another. But I think there was also recognition that if we do some of these things right, we make a good accessible system, we improve safety, that helps with equity. It helps with climate and some of the other outcomes. So they really more heavily weighted safety and state of good repair and some of those things. Next slide. Into the preferred scenario, which was the combined one that you just saw on the previous slide. So that's what they ultimately opted for. So this is how they're going to weight projects. So another way to say this is a lot of projects, a lot of our investments are going to be targeting reducing fatalities and serious injuries, making sure that the system remains open and functional on a state of good repair side, and that there is multimodal access for folks, which is the mobility accessibility side. So those are kind of the three things that weighted higher. I say mobility and accessibility in the same breath because there's a lot of confusion among the commission, and actually the letters that we got back on those terms, so we kind of combine them. So the three big ones are that safety, state of good repair, and mobility accessibility. Next slide. So now we're in a process of starting to, as I said, look into the investment opportunities, knowing that those are some of the focus areas. And one of the things we'll look at are the heat maps. I've talked to, I think, this group before about those, where we overlay the active transportation needs inventory, the ATNI data, with the safety data, with the other roadway and other needs to see where multiple high priorities overlap. So that's one way we're going to look at it. We'll also look at unique needs to each mode or topic, whether that's safety or bike and ped, that may not show up as kind of a system need. And then from plans from the area commissions and what they put together. And this is some of what we'll be sharing with the area commissions as well. Next slide. So we're taking what the commission settled on, and we are developing screening criteria. So it's not only we're going to try to pull investments that align with, say, safety, state of good repair, and access. We're going to pull those investments we think best align, and then we're actually going to run them through a process with that policy criteria and see which ones float to the top, and kind of go through that process. What's also on the slide is, as we manage the program, we'll set some readiness criteria for when projects are actually ready to go from the capital investment plan into the STIP, into programming for funding. So we're meeting right now with you all, with our area commissions, to share out what the OTC decided, and then start kind of getting ready to pull concepts together to think about things. So love any feedback this committee has on, as we think about investments, what do you see as particularly important for bike and ped? And I don't mean necessarily specific locations, but more thematic, like here's the main issues we're seeing for bike and ped. We think prioritizing, I'm just going to make up an answer, right? Like prioritizing bike and ped connections to transit is key. The safe routes to school investments are critical. We're seeing a lot of issues related to nighttime fatalities and serious injuries. So illumination is something that we need to think about from a system basis, right? So if y'all have any thoughts today or in the next couple months that you want to share, I think those are always welcome and helpful as we start identifying some of those investment opportunities and starting to screen those. So with that, I think, Roberta, we can probably pull down the slide deck, because I believe the next one says thank you. Thank you. So yeah, love to hear feedback, thoughts, reactions, questions, any of the above. And then maybe Chair Thompson, anything else you want to say from the active model chair yesterday?
Not right now. We'll see if any questions or some come up that maybe I can add to, but.
Okay, awesome. Kathy.
Yeah, I was just curious how the previous report on the KPIs will sort of play with this capital improvement program process, because if one of the highest ranking KPIs is those crosswalks and those aren't complete, and that's a goal, then how does that measure into sort of, that's a safety issue, obviously, and that will align nicely, but how do you rank or include that in the process?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that can certainly come up from the accessibility metrics that we use in terms of accessibility of the multimodal system for bike and ped. The crossings definitely comes up, and from the safety side. So I think from those two aspects, and exactly kind of how we quantify those, I think we'll have to figure out, but I would say the active transportation, so from a data side, the active transportation needs inventory, which I assume this group has talked about. When I say at-need, do y'all kind of know what I'm talking about? See mostly head nods, okay. So yeah, I think the at-need is really helpful because that ranks the top tier gaps in the system, which include the crossings. In addition to then the safety side, which is looking at where we have the highest numbers of fatalities and serious injuries, and safety risk, which I think is super important for pedestrians and bicyclists in particular. So it's looking at the number of lanes, like the width of the crossing, the speeds, the traffic that flows there, and then that gives a risk ranking. So I think those combined kind of data pieces will elevate up areas where we're lacking crossings, where we have either high risk or have seen safety issues there. So that's part of, I think, how we'll bring up some of those key investment areas. Does that make sense, Kathy? I make sure I hit your question. Okay. Cool. Yeah, Beth.
Yeah, just wondering how long this process took.
Yeah, so we've been looking at, so a lot of other states do a capital investment plan. This is our first venture into that, where we really conflated the statewide transportation improvement program, our 4-year plan, with all these conversations, which I think then makes it not as strategic as we should have been with our investments. It also doesn't make it accountable to some of these outcomes that we have in our plan. So it's always hard to trace your plans to your budget because the old adage, show me your budget, I'll show you your priorities, right? So it was always kind of hard to do those things. So I think this transition is really good, really exciting in many ways. So to answer your question specifically, we haven't started on it. What we've done is we've met with other states to see what they do, try to learn from those practices, see what kind of measures and metrics they use, how things feed into their system, then have gone out and looked at our processes, see what may work for us, talk to some jurisdictions and some others on like, do you think this will work? And really design the process. So I would say we're at the state where we've designed the process of what we think we need to do. Then we're starting to make some decisions so that we can begin it in earnest. And the first decision was, what are our priorities going to be? And the commission made those. So we started talking to other states about a year ago, asking for feedback on the goals and priorities about 6 months ago. Now the commission's making the decision on the goals and priorities. Now we're going to set the metrics for those in the next 3 months and then begin the work in earnest in January through the end of 2026.
Oh, yeah, that's great. That answers my question. And is this, I'm remembering that the state was required to do something similar to this a couple years ago when I was chairperson and co-chairperson. And it was because for federal funding. Is this the result of that, where during the last administration, the federal government set up a funding process where you had to have some sort of plan like this? Am I thinking of something else?
I think it's different. So the need for this was identified probably 2 years ago from a review that we did internally to say, how do we get ready and healthy for a funding package? That's different from anything the feds have asked us to do. The feds have asked us to do things around like resilience, for example, and we have to have a resiliency plan in order to spend some of the protect dollars that come in that we often put in like Newport and the coastal areas. That was different than what we're doing here as part of this process.
Okay. Yeah, there's a whole different people. RO dot representative was a different person, and so I think we kind of lost that information. I didn't take good notes, I guess, because I don't remember exactly what the process was. I remember there was a rush, but anyway. So this was to reiterate what you said. Make sure I got it right. This was initiated by ODOT, just finding that you needed to have a better process and have more moving parts involved, and so that's where you're at. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah, and we've talked, I mean, I've been at the agency for a long time. So we've been talking about trying to bridge the gap between our long-range 20-year plans and our like 4-year budget, and this is finally doing that. So I'm glad that we got pushed in that direction and recommended to do that, and it's been reinforced. The legislature hired a review panel to come in during session, and they saw that we were doing this work, and they're like, "Yep, do that thing. You guys need to do that thing." So it's been helpful, honestly, to have that backups to get the momentum we need to get this done.
Yeah, great. Good work.
I think we have a question by Emma. Emma, do you still have a question for Amanda?
Yeah, Beth, were you done? Okay, thanks. Amanda, thank you so much. I really appreciate that you carried our committee's letter and message from our committee to the commission, and even quoted some of the key messages that are coming up in committee discussions and carrying that through. So thank you, and coming back to say, hey, we heard you, and here's where the process is looping back around. Really appreciate that. I have a couple questions related to how does this relate to a few other things. So one is the Department of Land Conservation and Development has gone through a big rulemaking in response to the governor's letter saying, hey, metropolitan areas in particular, the cities and counties in those areas throughout Oregon need to be meeting greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. And since you're over climate as well as many other areas within ODOT, I imagine your brain's already connecting the dots with all these things. But the greenhouse gas emission reduction target work led to regional areas in metropolitan areas needing to have a regional scenario plan that shows how the cities and counties within those areas are going to meet those targets, but without ODOT's tangible changes on the ground, investing in walking and biking and transit, that's not going to happen very easily because ODOT plays such a key role in so many metro areas in the state. So what is the relationship to those regional scenario plans? And then there was one other connection I was thinking, and I'll drop in the chat the division in the state OARs for folks who are like, what are you referencing, Emma? This is jargony. That's what I'm referencing. Just dropped a link. So let's start with that one. And there was one other piece that I'll hopefully think of.
Yeah, great. And so the rules that Emma's referencing are making sure that when we're doing transportation planning, and when I say we, I mean super collectively, right? So cities and counties, as we're doing transportation plans, identifying projects and investments that we're not increasing vehicle miles traveled at the end of the day, more or less. That there are designations of areas that are climate friendly within basically a zoning framework to say in those areas you're going to have higher density housing, you're going to have more biking and walking investments, transit investments, you're going to actually deprioritize in a way roads in those areas and expansion in those areas. So all that framework still plays into anything that we develop and do, because any climate friendly area is still going to be a climate friendly area that's beholden to kind of the rules, regulations, requirements within those. I think not all parts of the state do planning the same with ODOT. So there are like some parts of the state that list ODOT projects as part of their system plan. So I think, Emma, to your point of like ODOT investments are as important, sometimes if not more, than the local investments. And the TSP, if they're only measuring the local investments, they're missing a piece of the picture. Many of the TSPs throughout the state include some ODOT investments, or at least considerations of those, but not all do. So I think we have to look at how we change that process to make sure we're being consistent. And I think that's where the plans, in my opinion, aspect comes in. There may be the data-driven management system side that says, here's the needs that we have. We have to make sure that that's consistent with what the plans are showing, and the plans have to be consistent with the rules. So I think by default, all those things will work well together. Will they work well together today? No, because there haven't been enough updates of those plans to really make those kick in yet. So I think we have to be thoughtful of the potential impacts, even if they're not measured today. So like 5-10 years from now, we'll be in a great place for that. Today, I think we're gonna have to be much more mindful of how we build those things together.
Yep, I agree. It's an incremental rollout, and we're midway into that process. The other planning document that I was thinking of is the Oregon Bike Ped Plan. So fantastic document. I think it's in the update process. I know you worked on that. Thank you for your work on it. How is that getting implemented through these actual like investment plans that ODOT's doing in the here and now?
I'd say a bunch of different ways. So, from the bike ped plan, a couple of our big priority efforts were the ATNI. And so getting kind of trying to build towards a management system, because if this was like my master plan at the time we used pavement management systems and bridge management systems all the time. It's just like breathing. We always pull projects from there. We know what our priorities are because we know what the condition is. We didn't have that in the bike ped side, so it was very opportunistic in terms of our investments. It's like, oh, well, we're doing that project, sure, we'll add a bike lane. But is that the most strategic, beneficial use of our funding? And so the management system, by having the ATNI, I think starts to get us towards that more strategic use by where are the highest and the priority needs that we have, and let's focus on those. So I think that's gone a long way and directly feeds into this process because it is the data side of things that we didn't have before. The other is the Blueprint for Urban Design, which we did not too long after the bike ped plan was adopted, which kind of resets on the design side. And this may sound like too wonky and like doesn't help, but it does, because it resets things like, let's have 11-foot, and this is not always the case because there's freight routes, right? But let's have 11-foot lanes as the standard. And then if you want broader, you're actually having to justify going to the broader lanes versus having the broader lanes, and we have to argue for those to get narrowed in order to add the bike and ped system and well, in order to add like the sidewalks in to the footprint of the roadway, right? So to do the road diets, to do those changes. So I think some of those standards and changes have helped. So the BUD is a big one. And then the other piece of it is setting the framework for things even like off-system paths. We have the policy in the bike ped plan that says, here's when they'll be considered regionally significant and define those. And so some of what we're asking the area commissions to do is develop regionally significant investment ideas. And so pointing them to that policy and having them use that through this process, I think will be key. So those are just some examples, but I don't know, Ian, if you wanted to jump in with anything else from your perspective. And I can't hear you, Ian. Is it just me?
While Ian's getting his mic set up, the last thing that I wanted to say is I think this is great to have a CIP that bridges the gap between the 20-year plans and the STIP. Because in my previous experience with ODOT, it'd be like, oh, and here's the STIP. You'd have an open house. Be like, why is there an open house? Because it's pretty much a baked cake. So you're like, look, we made a cake. What do you think of the cake? And people are like, well, if I wanted to have input on the ingredients or what that cake is, where did I do that? And it was a little disingenuous. So this feels like a better process. Thank you.
No, thanks. I appreciate it. Ian,
We
you
did
able
have
to
another-
talk?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. At this point, I don't have anything substantive to add. You did great, Amanda. I think you covered all the main points that needed to be covered about the bike ped plan.
See, I still love bike ped, y'all. I miss it. Okay.
There was another question, Mavis.
I just want to do one. I'm so glad you quoted me. And then two, I reiterate with the BUD, we were working really hard on getting a policy so that the bike and ped would be triggered. And it has I think it has made a big difference. And that makes me really happy to actually have been part of that process. And then the two things I have that I see that the bike ped plan, if we can like beef up, is one, the city coordinating. And I really think that the smaller towns, like the 10 to 15,000 people, like LeGrand, for example, like we're missing a huge opportunity. Newport, Because if you go to Eugene, you go to Portland, they have a planner that is all about bike and ped, and they're doing a great job. And then you get into the smaller towns and it's just not part of the conversation. So if we had something to trigger more of a policy, more of a reach out, something that so that every little town doesn't have to have an advocate, that'd be great. And then I know you guys have been doing a lot of work with the legislation, and this is not something that ODOT is going to fix, but the education around walking and biking really needs attention. So safe routes to school, it's great. But we need people in those schools teaching how to use this system so that everybody is saving themselves, really. So those are my 2 comments about going forward, and so nice to see you again, Amanda.
Good to see you too. No, I definitely agree with all those comments, Mavis, and especially I'm newly taking over the Transportation Safety Office for ODOT. Like that happens November 1st. And part of what they do is the education outreach pieces. So I've been thinking about some of the same things, but I'd love to hear that feedback. And I think there's opportunities we can improve there too.
Woohoo!
Yay.
Can you just speak a little bit more about that? So is ODOT Transportation Safety switching from DMV to you? What's going on?
Yeah. So just as a little history of the Transportation Safety Office, like each state has one. It's designated by the governor, and then there's a grouping of people. They work on certain things. Federal funding comes into them, and then sometimes flows to the DOT and other areas. Originally, it was its own like commission, separate like agency years and years ago. Then came inside of the Oregon Department of Transportation, was its own division under Troy Costellas. And then when Troy retired, it was put under the DMV as thinking, well, there's a lot of connections to some of the outreach licensing, training, some of those kind of things. And then over time, just realizing connection's not as strong. It's actually losing connection with the business side of things, with the engineering pieces, with some of the planning and research pieces. And so we've just recently made the decision to pull it into my division. So out of DMV and into my division, policy data analysis. Cool. All right. Well, that's kind of what I have to share for now. As I mentioned, if y'all have thoughts later in particular on kind of key bicycle pedestrian issues, like we talked about crossings a little bit earlier, if it's crossings, illumination, education, like whatever those top line things are that you think are super important for active transportation, feel free to send in comments to us. We'd love to incorporate those. And then also, I think the opportunity, if there's OBPAC members that are interested in going out and speaking with some of the area commissions on transportation, making sure they're tracking some of the key issues and help us with some of the representation in some areas where it's hard to find, that would be great. Kayla, did you want to add something?
I am going to add something. I will also, Kayla Hostmans, I work under Amanda. I'll also plug that the capital investment plan is probably going to be on the OTC, the Oregon Transportation Commission agendas every other meeting or so from here until, I don't know, through 2026 at least. So that will be another update point as well as on those OTC agendas to hear the latest on the capital investment plan. And then, you know, periodically throughout 2026, we're always happy to come back and give updates to this group as well. And just let folks know where we're at with the development process.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you both for taking the time to come and share that with us. It was a great presentation yesterday, Amanda, very insightful, lots of good information. And I'm going to take time, pass it back to Dave, who has our OBPAC recruitment update.
Thanks, Kathy. And thanks, Amanda. She just left, but that was a great presentation. So yeah, moving on, next agenda item is update on our recruitment for the bicycle industry representative. I'll turn it over to Ian for that if he's got his mic working.
I sure hope so. Do I? Okay,
Yes.
great. Roberto, could I trouble you to present the slides? Thank you. So last time we met, we thankfully were able to get Mavis to agree to another 6 months of sticking on. So that gave us a little bit more time to do a recruitment for her pending vacancy. Sorry, for the record, Ian Davidson, Bicycle and Pedestrian Program Manager. So I'm going to provide a little update on where we are in filling that vacancy. Could you go to the next slide? So just to, I guess, reset the stage. So OBPAC is somewhat unique in ODOT's advisory committees because you all were actually created by law. As of next year, it will be 55 years since the passage of what's affectionately known as the Oregon Bike Bill, or more accurately known as the Oregon Bicycle and Pedestrian Bill. And in that bill that then became law, OBPAC was created, and one of the positions, the position we're talking about today, is identified as a person engaged in the business of selling or repairing bicycles. And so if you could go to the next slide. So since we last met, I will first say that as you have likely learned in the news, ODOT has been rather busy. That also extended to a lot of our work. And so we did not get the recruitment out as soon as we would have liked, but ultimately the public notice of the vacancy went out on October 9th. And it is now live. That notice went out to you all individually as well. Presently, there is what we're calling an advisory committee interest form. It is very similar to past interest forms that this committee has put together. The close date on that is November 14th. So a little bit more than 2 weeks are still open for that. So in terms of next steps, once November 14th rolls around, I plan on sending to all of you the interest forms that we will have received at that point. In terms of how you want to handle that, that's maybe what we can discuss here. But ultimately, I hope one of the outcomes here is that you as a committee will be able to identify 2 to 3 preferred candidates to then recommend to the governor's office, at which point the governor's office will make their ultimate appointment decision, or excuse me, nomination decision on who will serve on the Oregon Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. So if you could go to the next slide, Roberto. As of yesterday, we have received 5 applicants, which, if you'll recall our conversation last time, I was actually expecting only 5 applicants total. So I'm actually delighted that we have 5 already. It is more than I feared because this is such a niche position. I actually just saw that I just got a voicemail from another individual who would like to apply, but is having some technical difficulties. So I expect that we'll have a 6th here shortly. With 2 more weeks, maybe we can get that number up to 10. But having glanced through the 5 applicants that I have seen, you have some really high quality candidates, like genuinely high quality candidates. So while Mavis's shoes will be immense and difficult to fill, I think you have some excellent candidates to choose from to ultimately narrow down to 2 or 3 candidates. So what I would love to hear from you all is how you would like to approach narrowing down this list. Since maybe at most we wind up with 10 applicants, I don't know if it makes a whole lot of sense to do a subcommittee. Maybe it does. Maybe that's how you all want to approach it. Would you all like to interview these candidates? Does the interest form provide you enough information? Those are the kinds of questions that I would love to give the answer. Sorry, one last thing. December 3rd is our next meeting. And so if November 14th is when we will have the interest forms, I could send that to you, let's say November 15th, November 16th. And then you would have 2 weeks with the interest forms. And so conceivably on December 3rd, you could make an ultimate decision on the 2 to 3 individuals that you would like to recommend to the governor's office, at which point I as staff would, work all of that and then put together those recommendations. You would just need to settle on names. So I don't know if that gives you all enough time, if you're comfortable with those 2 weeks, but that's one potential avenue. So I'd love to hear what you all think.
Thanks,
Okay.
Ian. So since I own this this section, I'm going to jump in first, and then I will recognize everybody else that wants to jump in. So what I'd first like to do is review how we've done this in the past. And I'm going to throw out what I recall, but I'd love to have Mavis or Emma remind me where I'm off track here. But my recollection of how we did this the last time around was that we did form a subcommittee. The subcommittee reviewed the submissions and came up with a short list of people that we felt should be interviewed. I don't remember whether that short list went back to the full committee for approval before the interviews. But then the next step was that the subcommittee members conducted interviews with each of the shortlist people, and out of that came back a recommendation to the full committee on kind of a prioritized list of the potential candidates, and out of that, the full committee chose one candidate for each position to recommend to the governor. So can I get some feedback on that from people that were maybe a little, I was on the committee, but I wasn't a chair at that point. Emma, I saw a thumbs up, I guess, from you. You think I hit that, or do you have a comment?
I think you got it. There was one cycle that we had some input based on current membership of the committee of what we were asking the subcommittee to look for in the candidate pool. We were worried that that might not be applicable, given we thought this would be a lower number of people completing the interest forms this cycle, given the more narrow criteria for the specific position. But I think you've captured it. And I think there might have been some changes to the process, or maybe this was something else with ODOT processes. Ian, is anything changed because we were maybe not quite following rules, or does that process still work?
It does still work. The only difference is that if you were to convene a subcommittee, it would be a public meeting just like this. So you would notice it, which would be just fine.
Thanks for that reminder.
And that would extend to the actual interviews that the subcommittee conducted.
Correct.
As well. Okay. And Emma, I think that was really good, because I think one of the key issues the committee expressed a lot of interest in making sure that we kept in mind when we were going through the process is to make sure that we were working towards meeting our state mandated goals of representation, that that the people that we recommend would move us forward in terms of making sure our makeup mirrors the state's makeup in terms of equity. And I see Leanne's got her hand up there.
Yeah, I wanted to just ask, recruitment has gone differently in different committees that I've worked with, and there has been some committees where staff does the interviews, which can be easier to schedule, does not mean it's a public meeting. Like, the committee could still create the questions they want asked, and then staff could kind of do the interview and kind of report back a summary or something like that. Like if you think that somebody coming to an interview that was also a public meeting might decline just because they didn't want their interview to be a public meeting, I think you could delegate that specific task to staff once you've kind of like chimed in on the questions you want asked and stuff like that. So just want to throw that out there as an option. It would also be easier to schedule if you're just dealing with sort of one or two staff people versus an entire subcommittee. So I don't know how folks feel about that, but I want to throw it out there as an option that has been used in other committees that I've worked on before where staff did the interviews.
Certainly recognize the advantages of that. My only concern is moving yet one more responsibility of the committee to staff. So I would ask, what would happen if staff scheduled it, but one of the invitees was a representative from the committee? Would that make it would that have to be a public meeting?
So long as it's not a subcommittee of it, that would be fine. And there's not a quorum present of the committee. Yeah.
Right. So maybe even one or two members of the committee, sort of a shadow subcommittee.
I would prefer if you didn't call it that, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that might be a way to proceed. Beth, I see you got your hand up.
Okay, so the main issue we had was when some people were recruited and chosen without the main committee knowing about it. So we want to stay away from that. So whoever the finalists are, or even if it's a very small amount of people, like 5 or 6 that sign up, whoever those people are, that the whole committee knows about it. Another thing that the whole committee wanted to do was to we made a list of priorities that went beyond matching the racial, et cetera, makeup of Oregon. So that's how, then I was on the subcommittee. That's how the subcommittee prioritized who was going to even be interviewed, because there were plenty of people. So I don't have that list, but I would love to see that again. And also, I just don't want to have people chosen without the whole committee knowing about it or having a say in it. So what happened last time is the subcommittee, which was, I'm not sure if it was for the last one, it was me and Dave and Nolan, and we were charged with getting 2 positions filled, and we presented towards when we had gotten, like I said, the subcommittees, about 5 or even more people to interview. We gave them, the whole committee, a list. We just let them know what was going on, I think, and then they could comment if they wanted to. That's right. We gave them kind of the bio of each person, and the whole committee could comment if they wanted to, and then we carried on with the interviews. And then we didn't give the governor's office a choice of 2 or anything. We just made our recommendations, and that's how I think it's been going on for many years, with just making our recommendation, and the governor says yes or no, or the governor's office. And so I want to make sure that we don't have what happened the time before my little subcommittee was formed, which was for choices to be made without the bigger group knowing. I think only the chairs knew about it. And the other thing is a clarification. We were under the understanding that if we didn't meet quorum, because the 3 of us were not 4 of us, that we could meet with. We met with Leanne and I guess Roberto. We had those were our meetings where we made decisions and we did interviews, five of us, but only 3 of us were OBPAC members. Is that we can't do that anymore?
So Oregon public meeting law does not allow a subcommittee of a public body to make recommendations to that public body without it being a public body itself. Now, if a different body, of which your staff person, Ian Davidson, was to serve on that body, and there was not a quorum present, this is kind of what Dave was hinting at, and then they were to decide on something, and then Ian Davidson were to make a recommendation representing those individuals, that would not be a subcommittee. That would not be another public body, because that would be a staff committee informed by, or excuse me, a staff recommendation informed by other individuals.
Okay. I guess we could
But
do that.
there's still quorum, like you couldn't have 4 people from OBPAC.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the point is it would be really hard for us all to, to interview people, the entire group, to interview 5 people. So yeah, if that workaround works, great.
Thanks, Beth. Kathy, you got your hand up.
Yeah, so sorry, but I would like to take the discussion in the completely opposite way. 1, I wouldn't like staff to do the interviewing at all. 2, I think it could be public. We're asking them to join a public committee, and they have to be comfortable in a public meeting. And so I don't think it's out of the left field to say, hey, can you come and interview at a public meeting? 3, in the effort of the spirit of transparency, and to show that, we're equitable and welcoming committee, we should, at the very least, if not interview the folks in front of the whole committee at a public meeting, then at least allow an introduction and a response to the single question of why do you want to join this committee, or why is this transportation issue, why are transportation issues important to you, or something that I'm sure appears in the questionnaire to show their interest. So I don't, and I've been on other committees where that's not out of the realm. And I think it's not intimidating to interview in front of a whole committee, because most folks are used to panel interviews, and it doesn't mean we all have to ask questions. If you prepare the same 3 questions that are asked, I've been to city council meetings and various kinds of commissions and meetings where they're panel interviewed for positions. And so you ask the same 3 questions of all candidates, and you hear their responses in turn, and that could be the entire meeting. And then decisions can be made later, or, whatever our process is. But I would like to have a little discussion with how people feel about just going the opposite direction. I don't think we should split off into a subcommittee. I don't see the purpose, what purpose that serves. Especially if we can incorporate it into one of our regularly meetings that isn't, jam-packed full of other activities, where we could just take care of it in that way. But that's just me. I'm more accustomed to seeing open and transparent meetings, and being able to be in a public meeting shouldn't be a difficulty for a candidate who's applying to be in a public committee.
Thank you, Kathy. I think you raised some good points there. So the one other, I guess, consideration that I think we need to keep in mind here is a timeline, because it's given our past several meetings, I think it's unlikely that we would have a one of our regularly scheduled meetings that would have time to interview 5 candidates. I just don't see that happening. I could be wrong for sure. Whether we do it there or whether we do it in a separate full meeting of the committee, we have to have a quorum to make any decisions. So if we didn't get a quorum, we kind of have to reschedule, I think. I don't think we'd be able to move forward. I mean, I don't see us doing the interviews without making a decision. Maybe we could do that. So anyway, Ian, you originally pointed out that we'd have the closing date was 2 weeks before the next meeting. We need to decide what we're going to try and do because that's a really tight timeline. I don't necessarily see us getting to a full decision by the end of that meeting, but maybe we can make it happen. I don't know. Any other thoughts? Emma.
Not necessarily helping get us to a solution, but while folks think, I'd like to hear from Ian why the recommendation that he brought forward was to recommend 2 to 3 preferred candidates. As Beth was saying earlier, typically OBPAC has just forwarded our preferred candidate number, like 1, to the governor's office. So what's the thinking behind that?
Yeah, it's twofold. One is that I was not exaggerating when I said that you have some really high quality applicants. I think you will, I mean, sure, you can ultimately settle on 1 candidate, but if you have an opportunity to be happy with 2 or 3 and then let the governor choose, I think I don't know, you're increasing your chances of winning is one way to look at it. That you are you're giving the governor options that you're happy with. And I could see a world where the governor's office is appreciative of that, and you still have significant influence over that. Yeah, that's my recommendation.
Yeah, obviously we don't know what the current governor's office might want or react to. I asked this question the last time around, I think, and whether the governor had ever nominated somebody other than the person that was forwarded, and nobody could remember that happening. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen in the future, right?
No, that's untrue. It did happen.
Oh,
Sorry.
it did happen. Thank you.
Yes. Fairly in the recent memory, I was not managing the committee, and maybe none of Emma, you or Mavis, I'm not sure if anyone was on it, but it was when the governor selected Hal Hagedorn. And OBPAC did not select Hal Hagedorn. But I don't know if Hal was I'm not sure how that all planned out, but that is so the governor can put whoever they want as the committee member. We are making humble recommendations.
They absolutely can, and it doesn't have to be anybody the committee even considered or applied. Right?
Yes. I just wanted to let you know. It's like actually that's not the case. The governor has put someone in fairly recent memory, and it was wonderful. Like that human did some great work on OBPAC, and I do think that Ian has a point. Just in general, when you give someone some agency to choose their person, they're going to be a little bit more invested in them. So if you did provide the governor 3 people instead of 1, that would give the governor's office agents a little more agency in like being invested in the committee and in the person and thinking through who they think might be the most effective, which would then benefit the committee. So I could see an advantage to provide if you had 2 candidates that you were like both would be great to providing 2. I could see the advantage in that. All right.
Well, thanks for jumping in, and I encourage everyone here to not allow me to lie to the committee because I have a terrible memory. So feel free to correct me. Carrie, you've got your hand up.
I might have missed this. Is there a ranking system that is assigned to the questions, and so then people will be scored accordingly? And does the governor receive those scores as well as say the questions and responses that are in the interview?
In the past, we have not provided that level of information with our recommendation, at least in the I guess the time or two that I've participated.
I believe that's correct, but I did not actually like there's a whole portal process, and I don't remember exactly what we submitted, but I believe it was just names and maybe where like a bio or their resume. I can't remember exactly what it was. And the governor's office does not provide questions to ask or how to do those pieces.
And I'll just add that the advisory committee interest form is a different process than what the governor's office does. So it's a different application. She or her office has different set of questions that they ask. And I suspect that they have their own ranking criteria.
And then what happens is we kind of gather both of those lists together and create our recommendation. And if our OBPAC's recommendation, and then if the OBPAC recommended folks weren't one of the ones that applied with the governor's site, then they have to apply within the governor's site because that gives them access to being selected. So it's cumbersome, but
Yes,
all of this is yeah.
So the application, I believe, is in Workday, because I had to, go through that process.
That's it. Yeah.
It is a pretty detailed application. So for those that don't know, there's a lot of information and questions that the person is putting forth. So as I think back to that, so even if they did not receive our questions, there is information and background that the governor's receiving that they're reviewing when they pick this person or not. So it's not just like a blind selection.
Okay, in the interest of moving this forward, I'm going to ask for a show of hands on some questions, not a here's what we ought to do, do you agree, but more of a should we do this or that, to see if we can get lined up here a little bit. So I think the first question, based on the comments I've heard, is do we want to have a public round of interviews conducted by the full committee or a subcommittee versus having an interview process that's run by ODOT and advised by the committee? Hopefully I captured that in a reasonable way. So if you think that the committee should run the interview process and that would be as a public meeting, please give me a thumbs up or raise your hand or something. I see Kathy, Beth. I'm going to look through here. Did I miss anybody? Those are the ones.
Mavis.
Oh, Mavis. There we go. Okay, so 3. If you prefer the idea that we conduct, have ODOT run the interview process, and therefore it would not be a public meeting, it would be advised by, there would be maybe a couple of the committee members attending. Let's see your hand or thumb. My thumbs up. And I saw Dell and Andre.
Carrie.
Was there somebody else?
Carrie also had her hand.
Andre.
Okay.
Andre had his thumb up. So 4,
Okay.
Andre, Carrie, Dave, and Dell. And then 3 for the first group, and
Yeah.
Emma doesn't vote.
Okay. So we got 4 people that think we ought to have ODOT run it and 3 that think the committee ought to run it.
Honestly, if y'all are just taking a temperature check, you could get a temperature check from Emma. I don't know if this, I mean, like if you want it, I don't know if this
Yeah,
is an official
sure.
official vote, but like this, I would say if you want to get Emma's temperature check, you can go ahead and do it. I don't
So
think we gotta
Emma,
follow
would you like
Robert's
to weigh
rules
in
here.
with a?
What I would weigh in with is, I think it'd be great if we could have a committee recommendation by the end of the December 3rd meeting. And so I'm leaning towards the second option because I think that's more achievable just based on timing feasibility. So I would be a fifth for the second option, assuming that that lends itself to moving things along and getting a committee member by the time that Mavis is gone.
And I'm gonna switch my vote. I was neutral. Now
And
I'm switching.
remember, like staff will report out to you all everything that we learn, and if y'all don't, like, you guys would still make the recommendation. We would just be doing a little bit more of the legwork. So, but I also get the feeling of like, but we're invested. We want to, so I get both sides. I just wanted to let you guys know that you still have the recommendation authority, and we're just providing information that we're gathering.
And I would encourage all the information we share with the full committee still. I think that's important. And maybe a little bit of discussion about, well, what are we looking for? Like this specific position on the committee, what is the value that it provides to the work that we do as a committee and our mission? Because that would help us filter for, are we looking for like the owner of Burley, or are we looking for someone who's wrenching on bikes in a small bike shop in Eastern Oregon? Very different candidates. I don't even know who's in the pool, but those are the types of people we might be seeing.
Good comment, Emma. Thank you. Okay, so I think we've got a consensus that for the primary reason of moving the process along and not having a vacancy for a long time while we go through multiple public meetings, that we will ask Ian and Roberto to conduct the interview process. And I'm going to ask right now for a show of hands of who would like to sit in on those from the committee. I see Beth.
Mavis and Andre also.
Okay,
Mavis, Andre, Beth. Is that what we're talking? What a great committee.
Sounds good.
That's not a committee.
Not a committee, I know. Like, no, Beth, no.
What a great group of humans.
So,
there you go.
so I'm gonna work on scheduling something pretty soon, because that last week in November is a week when a lot of people celebrate Thanksgiving and disappear. So we might have like a week. So I'll try and get time on your all's calendar soon.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. And I would encourage that group to send out to the full committee before the interviews the list of questions that you're going to use. Is that a reasonable ask?
Yeah, for sure. And if there's any specific things that topic areas that folks are interested in, please send those over to us.
Yeah, that's great, Andre. Yeah, it's better if you send them in advance rather than waiting and responding to what they send out, because we're on a fairly tight time frame. So
I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
be out of commission for the next 2 weeks, so send them to Andre. I'm volunteering him.
Well, send them to Roberto and copy the other folks.
Okay,
There we
good.
go. Good model.
And me.
I like those. Thank you.
Was that Ian? Was that you saying and me? Yes.
Yeah, Roberto and I can tag team it.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So I think we got a process figured out, and hopefully the outcome is an agenda item for the December 3rd meeting, where we will discuss the information provided by that group and make a decision as to the people or person that we're going to recommend to the governor. Okay, excellent. good discussion, folks. I really like the way that went. Appreciate getting everybody's input. Okay, I think it's back to, let's see, we're at 3:20. We need to wrap by 4, correct?
Yes, and could we actually skip ahead to one agenda item to the legislative retrospective? We've got
Yes.
a visitor.
So let's do that. And if we run out of time, then we may ask to defer Kathy's presentation. We'll see how we do here. So let's do that. So legislative retrospective is Justin.
Yeah, thank you, Co-Chair. Right here, Justin Hochschild. I'm a legislative liaison with ODOT's government relations team. I will say that I am stepping in for probably somebody that was a more familiar face, Collie Sullivan, who I know did a lot of great work with the advisory committee here. So I'm going to hope that I can step in and fill about 50% of what she did with y'all, because I know she did a lot for you. I'm going to give a quick presentation on the legislative sessions that we all just went through, both the regular session and the special session. It's been a bit of a wild ride, so we'll do a recap of it. It's going to be pretty high level. I'll do a short recap of the regular session and then dive into the short session, and then do an overview of HB 3991, if that works for folks. Of course, the bill that was passed during the special session. Happy to answer questions, though I know you're on a tight timeline, so I will just offer this at the beginning. Please feel free to interrupt me any point in the presentation. Otherwise, happy to answer questions at the end or to field them afterward too. So take some time to stew on the questions and shoot me an email. We'll be happy to get you what you're looking for. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here and hope that this works. One second. Okay, is this working for folks?
I don't see anything yet.
No.
Okay. And what about now?
Yep, we see it.
Okay, and hopefully it's like an actual readable view now. Okay, so let's jump into it. A little bit of a roadmap, just talked about this, what we're going to chat through today. So let's start with the 2025 regular session. It was a heck of a session, to say the least, unprecedented in a lot of ways. And one of those ways is the number of bills that were introduced. There were over 3,500 bills introduced. I'll show a graphic on the next screen that'll put that into perspective, but quite a few bills. So of course, ODOT had its work cut out for it. We tracked nearly 600 bills, kind of at the peak of things, bills that we were really paying attention to. Of course, we're engaged in the policy development process throughout the session, whether that be, providing technical assistance and objective feedback on proposals with members, or members of the lobby, engaging in testimony, whatever it might be. The agency also had 3 of its own bills. These were legislative concepts before they became agency bills. One was HB 2931. That was our interstate bridge bill, really just allowing for closer coordination with the state of Washington, who is going to be taking the lead on setting up tolling as on the interstate bridge, as Oregon has wound down its tolling office. So allowing for more collaboration and concerted coordination with the state of Washington on the interstate bridge. We also had 2 omnibus bills, one for our Commerce and Compliance Division, the folks that work with heavy trucks and rail, motor carrier compliance, making some technical fixes, making some fixes to bring us in line with federal rules and regulations, improving enforcement, things along those lines. And then a massive DMV omnibus bill, by far the largest agency bill we had, that made a whole host of kind of cleanup corrections in statute, improve customer service, improve some laws around driving while uninsured as well. Okay, So this is the slide that I was mentioning that would kind of put things into perspective. The first image on the left shows kind of the proliferation and the number of placeholder bills we've seen over the last few years. Placeholder measures, if you're familiar, will be kind of bills that oftentimes read as relating to transportation, but then, calling for the study of speed bumps or something. And ultimately, they're amended into a much more substantive measure later on in the session. So you've seen those have nearly doubled here since 2021. And then in the second image on the right, you'll see the number of bills that were introduced the last several sessions. They don't have the number at the time that this was authored in the Oregonian for 2025, but we knew it ultimately scaled to higher than 3,500. And you can see there hasn't been a regular session, or a session rather, a regular session since as far back as 2001, where that's been the case. So there've been quite a few bills the last session. So I'd be remiss if I didn't talk quickly about the various transportation funding proposals that were introduced during the 2025 regular session. Of course, kind of the banner proposal was HB 2025, the proposal that got the most attention in the media, the most legislative action. That measure called for $14.6 billion in its first 10 years. Through new and increased revenue mechanisms that were ultimately supposed to be directed toward operations and maintenance, some anchor projects, so some of those bigger mega projects, and then transit and rail as well. House Republicans had their own proposal that was HB 3982. It didn't call for any additional revenue, but it would have redirected about 170 million of existing funds to the state highway fund to pay for operations and maintenance and a few other items, including dealing with the overpayments made by truckers due to the highway cost imbalance. There was a smart proposal by a smaller group of Democratic lawmakers that was very similar to HB 2025, but it called for additional revenue, and it also placed a greater emphasis on the EV transition and bike and pedestrian infrastructure as well. And then finally, there was HB 3402. This was that last-ditch effort at the end of session to keep ODOT afloat and help us avoid having to lay off hundreds of workers and also maintain a similar level of service as we provide in the last few biennium. That bill did not have additional revenue for local governments. It did not have additional revenue for transit. Ultimately, I think we all know that despite these various proposals, the legislature did adjourn on the 27th of June without passing a funding package. And that led the governor pretty quickly to signal, I think, her intent publicly to convene a special session. Ultimately, that is what happened. And on August 29th, rather, the legislature convened for a special session to consider HB 3991. So this is the bill we know ultimately passed. I'm going to do a quick overview of the bill at a high level. Of course, one of the biggest things the bill did was allow ODOT to avoid some of those really serious layoffs and other budget reductions for 25 and 27. It also increased funding for local governments by roughly 30%. We'll see a breakout of that in a few slides. It also provided a temporary boost to transit funding via a 0.1% increase in the payroll tax. That is a temporary increase, and that will sunset or phase out in 2028. So likely be a source of conversation in future legislative sessions. It also made some pretty serious changes to how we fund transportation and tax trucks in Oregon. So it expanded a road usage charge program we have right now that is voluntary, so that EVs will ultimately come into it along with hybrids and plug-in vehicles. And then also made or included a whole suite, rather, of accountability and oversight provisions as well. So we talked a little bit about this in that last slide, but this is the meat and potatoes of the bill. If you're thinking, where are the revenue solutions at? These are the revenue solutions. Primary inputs being the 6-cent increase in gas tax. There's also increases in the registration fee, both base and supplemental, an increase in the title fee. And then, like I mentioned, there's also a road usage charge program that starts coming online in July 27. That's phased in. It'll start with existing EVs, then it'll wrap in new EVs and ultimately include both hybrids and plug-in hybrid vehicles too. And then, like I mentioned, outside of the state highway fund, so kind of a different bucket of money, there's the State Transportation Improvement Fund, or STIF, and that will see an increase due to the 0.1% increase in the payroll tax, but that does sunset, like I mentioned. So I mentioned we'd see kind of a breakout of the funding. This is what it looks like in terms of who's getting what and how much. ODOT's going to get about 50% of the funding, with 30% going to counties and 20% going to cities. This is consistent with kind of the age-old 50-30-20 principle that has governed a lot of transportation funding over the years in the state of Oregon. You can see local governments get about a 30% increase. And then $3 million from ODOT share is going to go to the Travel Information Council. That'll help our rest stops and rest areas avoid some pretty serious service reductions as well. So what does it mean for ODOT? All of the funds from HB 3991 that are state highway fund specific and not from the STIF, because those go out to transit agencies. All state highway funds are going to operations and maintenance. That was the need. That was ODOT's intent from the very beginning, and then it became the governor's explicit direction. And so that's, of course, what is happening. That means we're rescinding the layoffs that had been slated to take place earlier this month. And really starting to hit the ground running on what we need to do to staff back up and hire. So on hiring, ODOT is already beginning. In fact, we're well into our phase 1 of hiring on the critical kind of frontline maintenance personnel positions. And this is really important because winter is basically upon us. It is the department's intent to have folks on the ground for winter. They may not be there for the first flakes, and those first flakes may have fallen depending on where you're at in the state already. But the goal is to have them on the ground and providing a similar level of service as we have in the past. So the next wave of recruitments, because this will take place in phases, and you see there in bullet 3, will really focus on bringing back some key vacancy positions that the department has left open for several years now. In addition to focusing on frontline customer service staff at DMV offices, we've got a lot of offices that are understaffed and operating with 1 or 2 folks, and sometimes just have to close down because we don't have enough positions to backfill. So I won't go through this slide. It's a packed one, a lot going on here, but you can see at a really high level what the department can expect in short terms from HB 3991. Like talked about, critical vacancy hires are going to come online. It allowed us to avoid hundreds of positions in layoffs, including 382 in maintenance personnel alone. Kept 12 maintenance stations open. It's allowing us to ramp back up on litter and graffiti cleanup. It's going to help us fill vacancies in DMV for better customer service. So a whole host of really, really important stuff for the agency and Oregonians across the state. So this is what we can expect of the coming biennia for the funding from 3991. You can see in 25 and 27, most of ODOT's funding is restored. We did make some reductions in the legislatively adopted budget that the legislature adopted, but mostly restored in 25 and 27. In 27 and 29, we'll start to see inflation start to outpace the growth in revenue that's resulting from HB 3991. So we're going to probably start seeing conversations happening around that time about future budget reductions again. And then in 29 and 31, we'll likely be back into an austerity posture. And this slide is really just to underscore that this bill truly was a stopgap Band-Aid solution for a larger, deeper, more structural revenue issue that probably requires surgery, if you want to stick with like the ER, the ER analogy. So more work and conversations likely to come in terms of transportation funding in Oregon. So I mentioned there is a whole host of accountability and transparency mechanisms in the bill, everything from additional audits and reviews to greater oversight of major projects and review of budget and scope. The hiring and retention of the ODOT director also shifts to the governor. Project scope has been a point of concern, and so going forward, the OTC will approve certain projects that have expanded scope, and then the JCT, or the Joint Committee on Transportation, will have the opportunity to provide recommendations on how to fund some of that scope expansion if the expanded scope is approved. And then our Continuous Improvement Advisory Committee, or CIAC, we'll also see some changes and have greater oversight of some of those larger projects that we're doing along with JCT. So how is ODOT going to go about implementing 3991? It's a good question. It's going to be a transparent and public process. We're going to put together a tracking mechanism that'll be for the OTC, the legislatures, stakeholders, partners, the public, everyone really. And the goal is to have it available publicly on our website. We did something similar with HB 2017, which was also a big lift for the agency in terms of implementing. But folks, really the goal is to allow them to be able to kind of like track along with the department as we go about implementing the measure. And then you can see the various work streams. They largely track with the largest components in the bill, but we got a lot of work cut out for us, but we're well underway and already starting to kind of work through envisioning what implementing each of these work streams looks like for the agency. Of course, the bill remains to be signed, but of course we expect it to be, and so we're posturing as an agency to make sure that it's gonna get done the way it needs to happen. So looking forward, we're really focused on implementing HB 3991, of course. That's a pretty big lift, but there were a host of other measures that passed during the 2025 session that we'll be implementing as well. We'll also be preparing, believe it or not, for the 2026 short session, which is not that far away. That's slated for February of next year, so plenty of work to get prepared for that. And then also, believe it or not, legislative concept development for the 2027 session. That process is very early right now. I don't have much to share on that, but it is something that will be on our plate and that we'll be looking to tackle going forward. I will say for this group, if there's particular interest in any number of bills that were introduced in the 2025 regular session, I know there were some on e-micromobility, e-bikes, improvements to certain roadways. Those would be things that folks can feel free to find in our 2025 legislative summary. I'll drop a link to that in the chat here. It's easy to peruse at your leisure to look for bills that you're interested in terms of particular subject matter area. It's divided up into what passed and what didn't pass. So we hope it's relatively easy for folks to parse through. And like I said, I'll leave that in the chat. But that was a lot of information and I talked fast. So I apologize for that. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thanks so much. And take a couple of questions here. We got some hands. We did have one question in the chat, Justin, as to whether ODOT was going to be spending this anticipated revenue prior to the governor's signature, or obviously not actually spending, but are they moving forward assuming that that money is going to come even though there might be a referendum to repeal it?
Yeah, that's a good question. We know the referendum stuff is definitely out there and on folks' news feeds. What I'll say is the department is posturing right now to implement the measure, and so kind of a good example of that is that we've like rescinded those layoffs already. Right, we're looking toward implementing the various things. We're looking towards ramping up for the winter season, and it's a tricky position to be in. But we want to be ready for whatever the outcome is, and we want to make sure that we're able to provide the level of service that Oregonians need, and that this a bill allows for if we're ultimately able to do that. So.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not seeing any other hands going. Okay, Justin, well, thanks so much for that. That was
Sure.
very informative, and obviously we're partially relieved.
Right, we're right there with you. So thanks so much, folks. Thanks, Coach. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
I know.
Okay, given where we're at time-wise, I'm going to suggest that we hand this over to Kathy to move us into the division update if Suzanne's still here.
The division update today will actually be done by Andrea Durbin.
Okay, and
yes, good afternoon, everyone. And I'm realizing my camera is not working. I'm not quite sure why. I am standing here, but anyway, I'm a blue box. Hello, good afternoon. Yes, Suzanne is in another meeting, a rail meeting right now. So she sends her regrets, couldn't join us this afternoon, but I wanted to provide some updates. And just building off of the legislative update, Dave, you did a great job of summarizing what you heard at the modal chairs meeting yesterday. And then, of course, Justin's report just now. I just wanted to kind of emphasize kind of the huge relief that we have to have avoided the layoffs because the public transit division was going to be significantly impacted by the budget shortfalls. So really happy to be moving forward and with our team and very capable and smart team that we have. I wanted to give a couple of updates on active transportation related work. Safe routes to school. We are working for our next solicitation that'll open early next year in February. So we're excited about that. We'll have more to share with you next year as we roll that out. And I wanted to let folks know that we were able to renew our technical assistance contract as well. So we're able to provide continuation of technical assistance for partners there. On the Oregon Community Paths program, you all reviewed and made the recommendation to OTC for the 24 projects that we're now working on to integrate into the STIP plans. So we have some that have been integrated in the 24-27 STIP plan, and then the others will be incorporated in the 27-30 STIP plan. So we've been working on that and moving those projects forward. I wanted to let folks know that Justin touched on this, the increase of the payroll tax temporary increase, 2-year temporary increase. That is it's not as long as we had anticipated or hoped, but we are grateful for additional resources for transit agencies across the state. And of course, it's an opportunity for really for us to continue to do the work of integrating our modal options with bike and pedestrian investments and transit. And to that point, we have next week is the annual Oregon Transit Association conference, Oregon Public Transit Conference, which is happening in Bend. And ODOT will be leading a session that looks at how to integrate transit options, transit planning with active transportation modes. So we're excited about bringing some of that content and having conversations with transit providers and sharing some experiences of transit providers have had of integrating more with bike and pedestrian investments and modal options, multimodal options, and really looking at kind of the challenges, the barriers, and how to overcome those barriers. So we're looking forward to that discussion and continued discussions with our transit partners for integration. And then lastly, I'll just say that on the staffing side, we will be moving forward with recruiting likely at this point next year for the Oregon Community Paths program manager role, which has been vacant for some time. And we had Ula Yannick from Region 1 assigned on rotation leading that work, and she helped us get through the solicitations, the last solicitation cycle. Ula's since left ODOT, and Leanne has been very capably continuing to hold that work amongst other areas. But we hope to recruit and fill that position next year because there's so much recruitment, as we've referenced earlier in the meeting. Right now at ODOT, the recruitment is happening in phases. So that particular position will likely happen early next year. But when it does, we'll be sure to share that announcement with you all, and we would really appreciate your help in sharing that out with your networks so we can find somebody excellent to fill that role. And lastly, I just wanted to say I really appreciate the conversation earlier about just thinking about the input OBPAC is providing about ways that we can improve kind of communications about all modes, not just roads and drivers. And so I really just appreciate that kind of feedback because these are some ideas that we don't always think about, and we can take those ideas and move them forward and suggest and work with our partners across ODOT. So just wanted to express an appreciation and thanks for the earlier conversation that OBPAC members shared of kind of opportunities to do a better job of making sure bike and pedestrian needs are met across the state. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Not seeing any hands.
Okay.
Kathy, you think we're good to move on here?
Yeah, I'm give the time back to Dave.
Okay, thank you so much
Mhm.
for the presentation. That was great. Really appreciate it. Okay, so we're definitely running behind schedule here. What I'm going to suggest is that if Kathy, do you think you can fit meet your OBPAC member into the next 10 or 12 minutes? Or do you want to defer that?
I think I've done it before already, so just in an effort to get it over and to get everyone in the flow of doing it, I think I would just say that the questions that we're all asked to think about as we introduce ourselves are, who are you and what are your unique perspectives on for that you bring to OBPAC? Our favorite hobby, who's inspired us, and personal experience. So I will just quickly answer. I think I've answered the unique perspectives a few times, and that's accessibility is a big issue for me. So I am not a cyclist, but I filled the category of pedestrian and an active user of public transportation wherever I go. Lifelong user of public transportation. Favorite hobby, I am a paper crafter, but I also really love line dancing. So music, my favorite music is country music, and so it aligns well. Who's inspired me on bicycle and pedestrian issues? I would say that credit goes to my entire state of Massachusetts, where I grew up. It's a fabulous transportation city, state, and I've enjoyed growing up. I've had the privilege and enjoyed growing up with really great transportation options in Massachusetts. And I don't know that I have a personal experience with active transportation, but I will say that I have been that family member of someone in a wheelchair who has been trapped on a block. So that experience has happened, and it sort of opened my eyes to the power of having concrete spaces that align with people's needs. So entry, exit points, not having to drive your family member while children are in tow, trying to get off of a block through someone's driveway that wasn't blocked with someone's vehicle, is a real situation that many people face, and what drove me to be interested in transportation. So I think those were all of the questions, and hopefully we can all get in the flow of thinking about those things when it's your turn. And I'll turn the time back to Dave. Did I do it in 10 minutes?
Oh yeah, you were way quicker than that. Good
Okay,
job.
great.
Thanks so much, Kathy. We sort of put you on the spot about a week ago on this, so I really appreciate it. Okay, so the only agenda item that we really didn't hit today was this item that we popped on here about committee member feedback, which I don't really think is necessarily a good description of at least what I was hoping to accomplish, but we do not have time for that discussion today, at least not in any meaningful way. So, Ian, unless you really disagree, I'm going to suggest that we move that to the December meeting, and I'd like to have a little bit more discussion on how we structure that as well.
That sounds great. In lieu of that time, I'd love to provide some updates from the last meeting, if that's all right.
That's great. Go for it.
All right. So at our last meeting, I think I mentioned how we were slated to have representatives from the mobility program come and present, but because of circumstances related to the ODOT layoffs and uncertainty around funding, that was not in the cards. I wanted to let you all know that I have re-engaged with ODOT's mobility program, and I'm working to, now that the layoffs have been delayed, as Justin mentioned, I'm re-engaged with the mobility program, and I'm working to reschedule that. So I don't know if that'll be able to happen in our December meeting. That might be too soon, but perhaps in 2026 we'll be able to get the mobility program here, and they're the staff people for the Mobility Advisory Committee and the Stakeholder Forum, which talks a lot about the hole in the air, whether or not a 12-foot lane should be an 11-foot lane, and those kinds of questions. I know many of you have had a lot of interest about that, and so I wanted to make sure that that is not, I wanted to make you all aware that that is not something that I've forgotten about, that I am working to bring that back. But that was something obviously outside of kind of everyone at ODOT's control. But now we're working to reconnect there. I've also made a request into Director Strickler's office to have him attend one of our future meetings. As you might imagine, he is an incredibly busy individual. So I, again, don't know when that might be, but that was another request that you all have made, and I have not forgotten about that. So I'm working to try and get that lined up. So just wanted to follow up on those two items.
Thank you, Ian. I appreciate that. I appreciate that we're not forgetting about those. So thank you very much. Okay. I guess at this point we've got a little less than, or about 10 minutes. I was just going to ask if anybody had anything else they want to bring up. I see Beth has her hand up. So
something I
go
want
for
to
it.
bring up that I've been wanting to mention this. I would love to hear Ian give a 5-10 minute presentation on what he's doing, his job, his roles, his projects. Maybe I'm just throwing it out there, Ian, maybe in a future meeting that could be that could happen, and it's up to, of course, you guys, the chairs, to decide if that's a good idea or just a terrible idea. But I just I was looking at your ODOT page, and it seems like you're doing a lot of, not your page, but the one that has your name on it. It looks like you're doing a lot of stuff, and I'm just curious. I would like to have a little more detail on all those things. So I'm just putting that out there.
I will second that.
Okay. Yeah. You got a glimpse into two of the things I work on today with my presentations, but yeah, happy to think about a more comprehensive overview.
Yeah. Even a day in the life where you get your
Oh, dear.
coffee.
Yeah.
A little bit about you.
Yeah.
Sure.
Nice.
I was going to say, one of the things I'd like to hear, Ian, is kind of what your professional goals in that job are. Maybe a little bit broader than just what is on your plate right now, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I like
if
how
if you're brave.
If we've channeled the interview discussion to now just grilling Ian. I like this. This
Focus
is fun.
on you.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. That's a good idea, Beth. Thank you. Anybody else have anything they want to toss out before we wrap up here? Okay. Well, on behalf of Kathy and myself,
Mavis. Mavis.
Sorry. I don't.
Sorry, I'm just so slow with my buttons.
Go, Mavis.
Well, if we're gonna point at Mr. Davidson over there, I would really like to know how we can help you be more successful, because, I know that you are, you get to see a lot more than we do. So anything that you can bring to the table that can make it so that our ideas and your ideas are getting into policy and that we are advancing, I think that is super important to bring to the table. So not just how awesome you are, but how we can make you be even more awesome.
That sounds great.
Great.
Okay, anybody else? I don't see anybody. Kathy, do you see anybody? Any hands? Okay, I think we are good. And again, from Kathy and I really appreciate the participation today and everybody's energy to jump in and participate. I thought it was a great meeting, so thank you all. And we will, next meeting is December 3rd. It will be on Zoom again, and look forward to seeing you there.
Bye, everybody. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.